Thanks everyone. I recognize that I'm now standing between you and beer, so I'll try and make this quick and informative and hopefully give you something fun to talk about with others at the little happy hour celebration after this. My name's Jordan Furnans. I'm a consulting engineer with LRE Water. We're out of Round Rock, Texas. What I'm going to tell you about just today is a short, ongoing project that I've been doing on behalf of one of my clients in the Brazos River Basin. And really what I want to do is report to you what we've done, what we think we can conclude from what we've done, and get some feedback from you, other professionals, to say, does this mean really what we think it means? Should we look at this in a different way? Or anything else you can think of. So please feel free to give me feedback at the end, because I really want to get a sense of whether we think, or whether you think that we're on the right track with this analysis. Okay. So I'm going to tell you the story of this project. The Gulf Coast Water Authority has been a client of mine for about 10 years, and they've asked me to do a lot of interesting things related to their surface water supplies. This is the first project that they've asked me to look at groundwater. And the Gulf Coast Water Authority is located in Texas City, and they run they're a wholesale water provider. They basically take water out of the Brazos River in Fort Bend County and bring that water to users in Fort Bend, Brazoria, and Galveston County. So this is all the area south of Houston. They provide a lot of water to the petrochemical industries, as well as various municipalities. So they're a very big regional water supplier for the area, and they are 100% reliant on surface water rights. They have senior surface water rights in the Brazos River Basin. You know, they've got about 380,000 acre feet a year of paper water under their surface water rights. Of course, these are not 100% reliable. They're going to be reliable in a real wet year, but if the Brazos River is low, their ability to get water out of these surface water rights also diminishes. They do have a senior water right on the Brazos River, so they're the last person to get cut off if there were ever going to be water curtailments in the Brazos. But they're concerned, right, that what happens in current or future droughts, are they going to have enough water to meet their customer needs? They do get water out of the Chocolate and Mustang Bayou. It's a little less reliable and it's of lower quality than the Brazos River water, so they try not to use that unless they have to. They also get water from Jones and Oyster Creek, but again, that's water that they share under a water right with the city of Sugar Land. That water is not necessarily reliable. It's a relatively small watershed. So they are dependent really on water from the Brazos River. If the water in the Brazos River is not available at the time that GCWA needs it, then they can call on the Brazos River Authority, who of course owns and operates reservoirs upstream, to release water under contracts. So there's contract water between the Brazos River Authority and Gulf Coast Water Authority, and they have about 86,000 acre feet a year of contract water, which is essentially insurance. If the Brazos River goes too low, they call on the BRA to release water into the river, and that water flows downstream to where GCWA can get it. It's insurance that they hope they never need, and they've only used it in maybe 3 out of the last 20 years, right? So they have quite a lot of water that they're paying the BRA for access to, but rarely use. And GCWA is okay with that because they're at least maintaining their water supplies and keeping their customers wet to the extent that their customers need the water that they need to operate. Okay, so what is GCWA's main concern is, of course, customer water security. In 2011, we heard about that just previously. 2011 was a terrible year for the Brazos River Basin, and the lower Brazos especially. There were very senior water right holders that were calling on BRA to release their contract water in 2011 and get that water flowing in the river to keep water in the riverbanks and meet the customers' needs. And GCWA and Dow Chemical and others were panicking in 2011, worried that they were going to run out of water, so they ended up buying a whole lot of extra water from BRA above and beyond what they have under their normal annual contracts. Why did they do that? Well, what I show on this graph is in black, this is the actual gauged stream flow for Hempstead, the Brazos River at Hempstead. So it's a bit upstream of where GCWA would take water out of the river. And what you can see is it started off in the beginning of the year, of the calendar year 2011, flow was less than 1,000 CFS. It got up to 2,500 CFS, but then it went rapidly down until April. We were about 500 CFS, and then GCWA started to panic. And they called BRA and said, BRA, please release water so we can maintain our operations through the hot summer that we're expecting. All right, so that's what happened. They started using contract water in March, or in early May, and they used contract water from May all the way through middle of November, right? That's the most contract water they ever used to supplement water that was normally flowing in the Brazos River. Now the green line is a modeled stream flow that would have occurred if GCWA had not called on BRA and asked them to release contract water, right? So this is modeled. There's no guarantee that this would have happened, but what this is actually showing is that at multiple times in 2011, the Brazos River would have gone completely dry if the Brazos River Authority hadn't released water to support these downstream customers. That's monumental because it's never happened that the Brazos River has gone dry, not in recorded history at least. 2009, they also had issues where they were worried about the river going dry and people made releases for BRA. But it's a big deal to have the river go so low, and of course it panicked GCWA, as I mentioned. Now, the other thing, the flip side of this is GCWA knows essentially if BRA releases water from, say, Lake Whitney, they know it takes a certain amount of time for that water to move downstream to get to where GCWA can get it, okay? And so they expected, okay, we need water in 10 days from now, so it's gonna take 10 days to come from Lake Whitney, let's release some, we'll expect it 10 days later. 10 days come by and that water's not in the river. Right? GCWA was expecting it, it didn't arrive. It didn't necessarily arrive and show up until day 12. Okay, and it never showed up in the magnitude that they expected it to show up in. So GCWA's concern was, is somebody stealing our water? Is someone else taking it? Or is it just not making it all the way downstream? Is it evaporating? Is it going into the aquifer? What's happening? Why are we not getting the water we're expecting? So that was their big concern. They wanted to know, was there increased channel losses in 2011? Could those losses be attributed to additional pumping from the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer? And if so, should further regulation of that aquifer be imposed so that this doesn't happen to GCWA in the future, so they get the water that they're paying for from BRA, essentially. So that's what they asked me to look at. Again, this is a short, relatively short time frame ongoing project, so I'll take feedback later on it. But the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer is a pretty small aquifer as Texas aquifers go. It's a long one. It spans all the way from Lake Whitney, 13 counties down to the Texas Gulf Coast, or close to the coast exactly. It's really narrow, right around the Brazos River. It exchanges, the river exchanges water with the aquifer, goes in and out depending on the water levels in the river. There is some evidence that there is cross-formational flow from other aquifers underneath the Brazos River alluvium, but really can't quantify exactly how much that cross-formational flow contributes. And the aquifer itself was the subject of a detailed study that my colleagues from Interra published with the Water Development Board in 2016. Now, I should mention, I'm going to talk a lot about that study in the next few slides. I was working at Interra at the time that study was being done, although I wasn't one of the staff members working on that project. Okay, so one of the first things I did in doing this work is I looked at the work and the reports that the Water Board and Interra published, and what I learned is the recharge going into the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer is approximately 40 to 50,000 acre feet per year, depending on whether you're pre or post-development conditions. So we're in course post-development right now, so you're averaging about 50,000 acre feet a year of recharge for the entire aquifer. And that was reported to come from rainfall and irrigation return flows and your normal sources of recharge. So it's a relatively small amount, but that's what was reported. And then we have reported pumping. So this is all data from the Water Development Board water use surveys. These are estimated pumping values for the entire aquifer. And you can see a dramatic increase in pumping that occurred in roughly 2004. Right? From 2004 onward, you're well over 100,000 acre feet a year of pumping, up to 160,000 in 2011. Right? So the big drought year, that also happens to be the year at which the most water was used out of the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer. Right there, that tends to suggest maybe that extra pumping from the aquifer is reducing stream flow and caused the problems that GCWA observed. Maybe. Right? The other thing I want you to notice here is the blue color is pumping for irrigation. So irrigation is by far the most dominant water use type for the water coming out of the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer. I have a little note there in red that LRE, my company, and the Water Development Board, we're currently developing new methods for estimating irrigation water use. And we did not apply those new methods to modify this data yet. That's one of the next things we'll do in the near future, hopefully. Okay, so I presented this information to GCB. I said, this is where we're gonna go. I wanna do a sort of water mass balance of the alluvial aquifer. And so what we did is, okay, if we know the recharge is 50,000 a year and pumping is roughly 160,000 a year, you're obviously pumping more than is going back into the aquifer for recharge, so you're gonna be draining water out of that aquifer. How long is the aquifer going to be able to sustain pumping? And if you use the Water Board's 2014 total recoverable storage water calculation numbers, project that all out into the future, by 2046, the aquifer is going to be completely dry. All right, that's a scary conclusion. It's not one that we believe is really going to happen, but mathematically it says it will if all these numbers are correct. Okay? Well, maybe those numbers aren't correct. Maybe the pumping is not right. Maybe 2011 was an anomaly year and the pumping has gone way back down to levels that are closer to the recharge number. Okay, well, since the publishing of the Interra report in 2016, we've gotten a couple more years of pumpage data. And so I just updated the graph. And again, from 2013 onward, you can see that we're still generally pumping at the over 100,000 acre feet a year level from the alluvial aquifer. So pumping hasn't really gone down. It went down in 2015, but then it went right back up into high levels of 2018. So pumpage is still consistently high. So that's not a change. Maybe that recharge estimate is not quite right, right? Maybe the 50,000 is not quite right. So there's another study that the Water Development Board and WSP is currently working on, revising methods of assessing aquifer recharge. And I'm also involved in that project, and we developed a new method based on the SCS curve number method for estimating recharge, and I applied that to the Brazos River Alluvial Aquifer. And lo and behold, I came out with almost an order of magnitude more recharge than what was reported in the Interra and previous GAM reports. Now, I don't know that my method is right. This new method is right. It may not be. But it just provides some indication that maybe this 50,000 acre feet a year recharge number is too low. All right, and could be substantially lower than the actual recharge that's going on in the aquifer. How do we test that? Okay, so GSAB is again asking me, okay, all this information is useful. Do we get any sort of sense that the aquifer is drying out, or are these larger recharge numbers really essentially refilling the aquifer every year? And so we decided we were going to look at well hydrographs. So we looked at, in the Interra report, they studied wells throughout the aquifer, and maybe 13, 14 of them. I looked at those same wells again that were still collecting new sampling data since the 2012 period that was previously published. And I found a couple different trends, right? So on this table, I'm listing wells at the top of the table are more to the north of the Brazos aquifer, and then in Grimes County, of course, more down to the bottom end of the aquifer. You can see there's overall trends. So this is looking at time series of water levels from 1960 to the present. And there's more of a recent trend, which looks at water level changes in the last, say, 10, 15 years. And in general, I'm seeing increasing trends or stable trends in the water levels, right? So that suggests that, yeah, our recharge may not be right at the 50,000 level. If the water in the wells is not going down, recharge should be coming in, at least compensating for the extra pumping that we've been seeing since 2004. Let's look at some of those hydrographs in general. This is up in McLennan County, so just south of Lake Whitney, up the northern end of the aquifer. In these particular wells, you know, I think you can argue, well, first in blue is older data, right? This was data that was published in the Interra report. The green is new data that's been added since then, right? So these are new water level measurements that someone else made and made available through the water board websites. And at least in these two wells, it looks like you could argue water is the water level is going up in the wells in general, right? They're going to fluctuate a little bit, but it's at least stable and not decreasing for these 2 wells. If we look at a couple further downstream in Robertson County, you look at a couple other wells here, you can definitely see increases in the water levels, right? So again, this is supporting the notion that recharge is greater than the 50,000 and water levels going up. There's more water available from the aquifer than would be otherwise thought. Further downstream again, now we've got one well that maybe it's not really recovering, or the water levels are just stable in that top well on the top graph, all the green dots clustered together. But for that particular well, they stopped sampling in 2018, right? So they don't have data from 2019 or 2020 like some of the other wells that might indicate that that well is now increasing from now. We just don't know. The bottom well, you can see again, you've got a dip in 2011, but then the water levels seem to go up again, right? So water levels in general seem to be increasing, at least in the wells that are from which data is available. Looking bigger picture, averaged over the entire watershed, or the entire alluvial aquifer footprint. If you look at computed rainfall, and this is data that's daily rainfall data from the PRISM data set compiled over the entire aquifer, summed up by year, you can see a generally increasing trend in rainfall totals falling over the aquifer. 2011 is a bad year, of course, but after that you got more rainfall than you had previous years. Recharge, again, calculated the same by our new methods, is showing the same sort of increasing trend over time with a dip in 2011. All this leads me to conclude, at least, that we're seeing pumping increases. We're seeing water levels generally increasing in the aquifer, and they seem to fluctuate with rain levels and recharge, right? So in our way of thinking, this is consistent throughout the entire aquifer footprint. It suggests that the GAM recharge is too low, and it suggests that rainfall patterns are really going to dictate recharge and water availability from the aquifer. Okay, that's pretty good. GCBA was happy to see that. Then they wanted to know, okay, can you quantify streamflow losses resulting from aquifer pumping? So that was the next step. And we did this in a real systematic fashion. We looked at the actual GAM models from the Brazos Alluvial Aquifer, located the 2,262 wells that are in the Water Development Board databases and located them within the aquifer. We assumed all of those wells were present and pumping from 1980 onward, right? And then we took our county-wide annual pumping numbers, applied that to every well in the county, and said pumping was going to occur 24/7 from April 15th to October 1st of every year, right? So it's mimicking the irrigation season. It's not perfect, right? But it's a good enough estimate to give us an idea of the potential impact of this pumping. We used properties of the aquifer to calculate what the distance the distance from the well to the river. We could calculate that. Then we used the aquifer properties from the GAM to get transmissivity and storativity. We apply the Glover-Bommer equation for calculating streamflow depletion. And the principle of superposition, of course, in groundwater allows us to simulate what would happen when you have pumping actively occurring and when you're outside of the irrigation season and no pumping is occurring and you're allowing water levels to recharge, right? Now, I recognize that the Glover-Bommer equation may not necessarily be 100% applicable to the Brazos River. I mean, it specifies this very specific conditions in which the Glover-Bommer equation should be used. The Brazos River alluvial aquifer may or may not meet all of those conditions. But in general, Glover-Bommer equation results would tend to overestimate the impact of pumping on streamflow depletion. So the numbers that I expect to get from this calculation are going to overestimate things. So my theory there was, okay, if this shows a problem for GCWA, we can study it further and use the more sophisticated depletion method calculation methods to better refine our answer. But if it shows this is not a problem, we don't need to do this extra work, right? And of course, GCWA likes that because they have to pay for extra work, right? What do we get? Well, what I'm showing here on this graph is from 1980 through 2018, that's when we have actual pumping data from the water use survey data set. That's shown in blue. So the pumping levels are in blue. The sort of cyan color from 2018 onward, that's assuming constant pumping or constant 2018 levels of pumping during the irrigation season. So it's just assuming what's going to happen into the future. The red line is our calculated streamflow depletion from the Glover-Bommer equation. What is it showing us? Well, it's basically showing us that even over this entire long time period, we're getting between 150 and 200 cubic feet per second streamflow depletion from all of the wells pumping in the Brazos Alluvial Aquifer. 200 CFS, 150 CFS, that's a lot of water, right, that's being taken out of the river. But is that enough to really hurt G sub A and other senior water right holders on the basin? Well, that's if you're using it in irrigation. What if all of that irrigation water happened to be magically transferred into municipal use where it was being pumped 24/7 every day of the year? Right, the pumping rate would be less, but what I'm actually showing in this graph is the depletion resulting from that would be greater. Right, so if this was, the irrigation pumping regime works in favor of maintaining the river flow a little bit better. So if you were, again, to magically transfer all the irrigation pumping into municipal style distribution of pumping, the depletion would be greater. Right, so that was an issue that G sub A wanted to know. What would happen if all of these wells were moved from their exact location in the aquifer? What if they were moved closer to the river? How does that impact the calculations? And of course, you know, the depletion is greater the closer you are to the river. So if we moved all of the wells to exactly 1,000 feet from the Brazos River, depletion would again increase and you'd get between 200 and 250 CFS being depleted due to the whole pumping. All right, is that a problem? Well, let's go back to our original graph where we showed the 2011 stream flow. And now I've added a few lines to the graph. First, the blue line shows the actual pumping amount and timing of the total irrigation pumping from the aquifer. So we were pumping a little less than 500 CFS in the top of the blue line during the irrigation season. The red lines are the depletion that's calculated. And you can see they're pretty close to the bottom of the graph. They do come out to be 200 or so CFS. And if that pumping amount, that depletion amount had been still present in the river, that would have benefited G sub A and the other senior water right holders, right? So there is some depletion that is occurring, at least according to this math, and that depletion is important to G sub A. Now, it wouldn't have been important back in the beginning of 2011, right, when the stream flow was 2,000 CFS. G sub A wouldn't have cared of losing that 200. But during that dry, hot summer, that's when they would have felt it, right? So what are the takeaways from all this? You know, the original question, did channel losses increase in 2011? Yeah, they probably did, but there was also an impact of lower precipitation and recharge in 2011 that was going to cause problems for G sub A. Is alluvial aquifer pumping to blame? Well, yes and no, I think, is what we can conclude from this. It does reduce water in the river, but does it reduce it enough to be problematic from a water rights, surface water rights perspective? I'm not really sure yet. Should further regulation be implemented to sort of maintain the viability of surface water rights? Possibly. You know, maybe making sure that pumping doesn't occur 1,000 feet from the river, that would be a benefit to maintaining stream flows, or making sure that a lot of these pumping wells, if they're being used for irrigation, not to transfer them to municipal use, because that would cause greater impact. That's where we are. And so I'll leave you pretty quickly. We've got some more time or some questions, but that's our analysis. Where can we take it? We're not really sure. What does it mean for G sub A? We're not quite sure yet, so we'd like to get your feedback. And with that, I'll take any questions. Yes? We did not account for changes in soil moisture or return flows. Yes. Yes. There's multiple groundwater districts that are impacted or have jurisdiction over the alluvial aquifer, so it would fall to them, I would imagine. Yes, John. I mean, it really depends. The Brazos Alluvial Aquifer, the Brazos River itself incisors itself pretty well into the aquifer, and that's one of the key conditions for making the Glover-Balmer equation applicable. So I think it's a reasonable approximation of what would happen for this particular aquifer. There are other equations that we could use that'll probably come up with lower values, and we haven't tested those yet. Okay, well, let's go get some beer.